Good afternoon on this June 21, first day summer 2022. And it makes me sad when I see the killing and destruction of war in the Ukraine. It makes me sad to remember that there was an agreement, Minsk II, which in fact brought stability to that region, an agreement between Russia, Ukraine, backed up by Germany and France, that granted sort of semi-autonomous independence to the disputed region. Nobody happy with it, but if it had been stayed in play, instead the Ukrainian government in essence declared war on that idea, and we sided with them. And now we're in a fix. Makes me sad to see that no matter how much arms we give to Ukraine, no matter how much money, Russia is going to meet it and more. And when does the escalation stop? Makes me sad to think that if Minsk II had been allowed to play out, that region today would be at peace, learning to live together, learning to live the best of the religion, love one another, even unto your enemies, doing the best they can to make peace with living together in commerce. A time to let that play out, let that growth happen. Meanwhile, Ukraine itself, because there's still Ukrainians, so meanwhile Ukraine itself gets its act together, because at least a decade away from being able to join the economic union. So you can be working towards that. Putin has just said he'd never had any problem with that. So it makes me sad that there's just so many ways this whole thing could have been avoided if we had sat down at the peace table and negotiated, genuinely negotiated, which means genuinely listening to what the other guy wants and needs to feel safe. No different than the Cuban situation when, imagine if Khrushchev had said to Kennedy, yeah, we're staying here, we don't care, why worry? My guess is we Americans would not have tolerated that and would have invaded Cuba. We'd be doing exactly what the Russians are doing. But it makes me sad that could we not foresee that and just avoided all of this killing? But at the end of the day, there's going to be a truce. And my guess is the war has redrawn the boundaries. And that will be part of the new peace. But seeing the horror that war requires to win. So we went to war. This is where we came to. First of all, Ukraine would be in a much stronger place today if it was just living the Minsk II agreements. If they lived up to that, they'd be much farther ahead than where they are today. A nation destroyed, running out of ammunition and blood, up against an enemy who can continue to escalate as much as they want. It makes me sad to think that the whole thing could have been avoided if people had been just thinking ahead. But we know there were people thinking ahead, and of course part of what they were thinking ahead about was exactly creating this war. So the people who wanted war got war. It makes me sad to think that once again, war won. Didn't have to be that way. President Bush could have been peacemaker not a power broker, not have taken sides. In fact, work to implement the MIS2 agreement, which is what Trump would have done. On these two things, Democrats and Republicans could have agreed. But instead, it makes me sad that it just seems that whatever the majority of one party takes, the other party takes the exact opposite. And it's something so important as peace and war. It makes me sad that we're not quite yet able, as a people, to ask our president to negotiate. Time to negotiate. May have been a bad idea to get involved in this war the way we did, but we can talk about that. Right now, it's time to stop the killing. To continue to escalate will mean we'll continue to escalate. Russia has already put in place its nuclear plan policy. It's preparing for the next level of war, and well, it should. Doesn't have to be that way, though. We could sit down at the table, call a truce, an armistice, and wherever the boundaries of war are on that day, that's the new boundary that you work with. That's where the truce starts. The killing stops. No point in killing anymore because it's just wavering back and forth, and could that be that way for years? And what's the point? Time to put down our arms and learn to live together with the current situation. And let's try in the future to avoid war, because it's all going to come down to a discussion about territory anyhow. And MIS2 provided that framework to encourage Joe Biden to put that on the table. And with the world watching, make it happen. This gives Ukraine still large territory, boundaries, paying the price for making war on its own people. Would have been better to live with the original agreement. They'd be much farther ahead today. But that's all water under the bridge, and the Ukrainian people will have to sort that out. It's time to stop the killing. And it makes me sad that there's not yet in the streets. I do hear Republicans don't like funding the war in Ukraine. Why can't Democrats join them in that voice? Stop the funding of the war. On this one thing, Democrats and Republicans agree: stop funding the war. Time to negotiate. On one voice, we can end this war. We can unite on that. But I fear my Democratic colleagues are kind of locked into a mentality of not reaching across. We understand Republicans don't reach across because that's what they do. But we Democrats have to rise above that and reach across. On this one thing we agree: stop the funding of the war in the Ukraine. And make economic funding to rebuild Ukraine contingent upon Zelensky sitting down to make peace with what is. Makes me sad. In this moment in Ukraine, the horror, the hell, that's what you hear. The people are there, that's what they're saying. It's a living hell. It is. And why we allow that living hell anywhere on the face of the earth, to happen to anyone on the face of the earth. Shame on us. We'll get there someday. This is an example to stop the killing. So as you can hear, it makes me not just a little sad, but kind of mad that we're not speaking up to stop the killing. Biden negotiate. Republicans and Democrats agreeing. No funding for war in the Ukraine. Only economic development when a truce is called. Each side paying more retributions, if you will, to rebuild that torn country. Makes me sad that that's not the discussion on the news tonight. Instead, it's Zelensky calling for war and more war, when it seems to me that he faces an impossible task. And the sooner he recognizes the reality of that, the better. God bless him. It would be a painful choice, but the right choice to lead his people to peace. Makes me sad that that's not the dominant news tonight. God bless.